A couple years ago, us Sacramento Kings fans dreamed of the stress of a post-All-Star break playoff race, and now that we're in the thick of it, oh man, we got what we bargained for. The Kings are locked in a very competitive Western Conference playoff race. It's going to be tougher this season than it was last season with the Kings securing the third seed, but we're going to break down the Kings' road back to the postseason right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And I'm a WWE wrestling fan. Now, before you turn off this podcast, if you're not a wrestling fan, understand I'm making an analogy here because the biggest event in wrestling, the Super Bowl of wrestling, is WrestleMania. And in the months build up to WrestleMania, they call it the road to WrestleMania. And that's where we are in the wrestling world right now. Well, let's apply that same way of thinking to the Sacramento Kings and what they're doing right now still during the regular season in their road to the postseason. Now, if the WrestleMania is the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals, we're not necessarily talking about the Kings' road to the NBA Finals right now. We're just talking about the Kings' road back into the playoffs. And after the Kings win over the San Antonio Spurs, I spent a lot of time talking about and also played some audio from a couple Kings players and head coach Mike Brown talking about the significance of this playoff race, right? The significance of the remainder of this season. Of course, we want the Kings to get back to the playoffs so that they can then prove that they can go further in the playoffs and get closer to a championship than they got in the postseason, being eliminated in the first round last season, right? So the playoffs are definitely more important. But this road back to the playoffs, with how tight this playoff race is, with how many unbelievably talented teams there are in the West, and with the very significant difference between being a 6th seed and making it right into the playoffs and right into the first series versus being a 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th series and having to make it through the play-in tournament to actually get to a playoff series. Like this road, this final playoff race, this final stretch of the season is more significant than it ever has been. It's a great opportunity for this Kings team to show their growth, to get better, to improve, to build the right habits and make the right steps towards climbing that ladder to ultimately becoming a championship contender. So if this is the road back to the playoffs for the Sacramento Kings, let's break this down. And honestly, the Kings have 27 games remaining. As of right now, they're 9 games over 500, right? They're 32-23 on the season. If they want to match last season's 48 wins, they need to go 16-11 over their final 27 games. Very achievable for this Kings team. 16-11 gets them at 48 wins to match last year's total. Now, last year, 48 wins was enough to be a 3rd seed. This year, 48 wins might not be enough to be a top 6 seed. It honestly might not be. Like right now, the Kings are in 7th. They're a half game back of the Dallas Mavericks, who are in the 6th spot. Again, that's the sweet spot. You're 6 or higher. You're right into the playoffs. No play-in tournament. So, of course, 5 is still in reach, too. The Kings are only 1 game back of the New Orleans Pelicans, are in the 5th spot. And 5 or higher should definitely be the goal, right? If you're the 6th seed, too, the Kings might match up with a team like the Los Angeles Clippers, who, of course, they play tomorrow night. And that's a team that could give them some matchup problems. But regardless, it's not like the Kings have to get 6 or they're going to be a play-in team, or that's their only option to them. They definitely should be shooting for 5 or higher. But getting to that 6th spot, that is the sweet spot. And right now it's held by the Mavericks, which the Kings are only half a game back of. That being said, it's not like they have a massive safety net behind them. Technically, in terms of the win-loss column, the Kings are only slightly ahead by a few percentage points of the Phoenix Suns, but the Suns are also half a game back of the 5th seed. So the Suns right now are in the 8th seed. The Kings are in the 7th seed. Then you look down to the 9th and 10th seeds, the final 2 play-in spots, and those are held by the Lakers and the Warriors. The Lakers are 2.5 games back of where Sacramento is at in 9th. So there's a little bit of room between 7-8 and 9-10. Not a lot of room. That can be made up quickly, especially if the Kings struggle in this road to the postseason. But ultimately, the Kings are looking up, right? They're not looking down. There's teams biting at their heels for sure, but the Kings are also biting at the heels of a couple other teams to try and work their way into a guaranteed playoff spot. I'm confident that the Kings are a top 8 team. And that might come back to bite me, but I'm confident in saying that this Kings team is not going to fall below 8, right? I think they are ahead of the Lakers and the Warriors. Those are 2 teams that obviously have plenty of veteran and star talent that can get hot at the right time, but I'm pretty confident in this Kings team ability. I believe that the worst that this Kings team is going to be is 8th. That being said, we still don't want them to be 8th or 7th, right? We want them to be top 6, but I'm pretty confident that the Kings aren't going to fall further than 8. That being said, they match that 48 win total from last year. I think that secures them a 7th or 8th seed. But if they want to get to 6th or higher, they really want to get to 5th, I think it's going to take 50-plus wins, which means that forget the 16 and 11 over the remainder of the season. The Kings need to go minimum 18 and 9 over the remainder of the season to get to 50 or more wins. So let's look at these final let's look at these final 27 games. We got to find 18 wins in these 27 games. Now, we're not going to run through the schedule and break down each game and say win or loss or win or loss, but I have the Kings schedule in front of me, the remaining 27 games of the schedule. And when we try and find wins, when we're looking for wins on paper, we're ultimately looking at games that we believe, based off the circumstances, based off of records, based off of injuries, whatever the case may be. At this point in time, we try and project which games that we believe for a certain that Sacramento should be winning. Now, should and do win are very different things, right? The Kings have lost to bad teams already this season far too many times. We've also talked about their safety net. If they want to be a top 6 team, I think their safety net to lose to bad teams is pretty much gone. But I'm doing this exercise intentionally because I looked through this schedule and I found 9 win on paper games in the final 27. The game against the Chicago Bulls at home, against the San Antonio Spurs at home, the Houston Rockets at home, even though the Kings have lost to the Rockets twice, based off where the Rockets are and where the Kings want to be and the Kings being at home, I would put that in the category of an on-paper win. It's a game that the Sacramento Kings should win. So there's 3. The Memphis Grizzlies at 4. The Toronto Raptors in Toronto. The Washington Wizards in Washington. The Utah Jazz in Sacramento. The Brooklyn Nets in Brooklyn. And the final game of the regular season, the Portland Trail Blazers here in Sacramento. 9 games there that I have identified as wins on paper. Again, I'm not guaranteeing the Kings win those games. I'm just saying those are the 9 games that I can lay out that I think the Kings absolutely should win, at least based off the circumstances right now. I point that out to say this. That's only half of the 18 wins that the Kings need to get to 50. Meaning, if everything goes right, if they win all these games that they should be winning on paper, which is tough to do, if they do that, they're only halfway to that 50 mark, which means they also have to beat some really, really good teams. So I've broken this road to the playoffs over the final 27 games. I've broken it down into 3 categories, 3 parts. Part 1, survive. And I'm talking about the next 4 games specifically. Tomorrow night, the Kings in Los Angeles taking on the Clippers, a Clippers team that has dominated Sacramento this season, a Clippers team that is ahead of the Kings in the standings pretty comfortably, but still, it's not so much losing a game drops you further behind the Clippers. It's losing a game potentially drops you further behind the Mavericks and the Pelicans and allows the Suns to leapfrog you, right? So it's not just falling behind the team that you lose to in the West, it's falling behind those other teams as well. So you have the LA Clippers, then you're home on Monday, second night of a back-to-back against the Miami Heat, who you've already lost to on the road. Then you have your fourth and final meeting with the Denver Nuggets that you have beaten 3 times, but this one's in Denver again. And I doubt the Kings can feel super confident about sweeping the defending champions in 4 games, although it's certainly possible. And then at Minnesota Timberwolves, who are one of the top teams in the Western Conference and provide or present some matchup disadvantages for Sacramento, to say the least. These next 4 games, Kings could easily go 0-4. Like, we're being honest, right? The Kings could easily go 0-4 over these next 4 games. I say survive because if you can go 3-1 or 4-0 during this stretch, holy smokes, amazing, perfection, wonderful, amazing job, Sacramento. You might want to throw a parade for that, right? Like, if the Kings do that, then I'm back in the, yeah, this team's a real deal team. They're in the mix for a top 5 seed for sure. But if you can find a way to just split these games, right? You lose against the Clippers tomorrow, but you beat the Miami Heat, you sweep the Denver Nuggets, and then you lose in Minnesota against the Timberwolves. Or find a way to win 2 out of these 4 games. Just survive. Just go 500. Just be average through this stretch. That's step 1. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to go 500 through this stretch, because they can easily, again, go 0-4 or 1-3. If you're going to go 500 through this stretch, that's fine. You're treading water. That means you have to make up ground in the next section, which I call strike. So you have survive, now strike. And strike is this stretch of the season with a lot of those win-on-paper games that you have to take advantage of, right? That next stretch, after you get through these 4 tough games, you have the Bulls at home, then you're in Los Angeles taking on a Lakers team that you're ahead of in the standings, and you have been and are better than, in my opinion. Then you have the Spurs, the Rockets, the Bucks, the Lakers, the Knicks, and the Grizzlies all at home, part of a 6-game homestand. Then the Raptors in Toronto, followed by the Wizards in Washington, followed by the Magic in Orlando. That is a stretch where you need to pick up wins, right? If you're looking to get to that 50-win total, if you're looking to win 18 of these final 27 games, a good chunk of those wins has to come in that section, right? That is your time to strike. Survive those first 4. Get through them, tread water, go above 500 if you can, but just tread water. You get through it treading water, you can feel good about yourself because you're going into a stretch where you have to strike. You have to take advantage. But if you fail to take advantage there, that's where I really feel like this Kings team could be on the outside of the playoffs looking in because they didn't take advantage of that stretch. That being said, then there's the 3 portion, or the third part of this road back to the playoffs. So we have survive, we have strike, and then we have secure. So let's say that the Kings have gone 500 over these next 4 games, that they go 3 or 4 games over 500 or 5 games over 500. They pick up some wins during that strike portion. They're in that 5th or 6th spot. They still got teams like the Mavericks to worry about. They still got the Suns to worry about. Other teams that are still right in that mix. But now they've got that spot because of the wins that they just picked up. Now they have to secure it. They do that in this stretch, March 25th through April 2nd. It's a homestand, right? This homestand is where I believe the Kings can and potentially will secure an actual playoff spot, an actual top 6 spot. That's because they take on the Philadelphia 76ers, followed by back-to-back games with the Dallas Mavericks. Back-to-back games against the team that's right there with you. Those games are going to be monumentally important, right? The first of those back-to-back games is on the second night of a back-to-back, meaning you play the 76ers, the very next night you play the Mavericks for the first time, then there's a night off, then you play the Mavericks again, right? So those games are going to be unbelievably important. Then you have the Utah Jazz, which you should be beating at home, and finally a game against the Los Angeles Clippers, which who knows where the Clippers are going to be in the standings at that point in time. But again, a win or a loss there could be the difference of 1 or 2 spots in the standings. So you have the survive over these next 4 games. You strike with those teams that you should be beating in that group of winnable games, and then you secure your spot with that homestand, including 2 games in a row against the Dallas Mavericks team, who's going to be right in the thick of it with you. That's what I look at for this road to the playoffs. That's breaking it down. What do you think about this road to the playoffs? Which games are you looking at? Which games are you concerned about? Where do you think the Kings will end up? Let me know. Hit me up on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. And, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. So pick the biggest favorite you can find, right? Find something that you just absolutely will hit. Whoever the worst team in the league is playing, like whoever the San Antonio Spurs are playing, or whoever the Charlotte Hornets are playing, the Detroit Pistons are playing, pick any of them and bet on the other team, right? It doesn't matter that bet is not going to have a good payout for you, right? It doesn't matter that $5 bet is only going to get you $1 return. Who cares? Because once you win that bet, again, there's $150 worth of bonus bets that you're going to get on top of that. And then you can use that $150 to really make yourself some money by betting on like Malik Monk to win Sixth Man of the Year, to bet on the Sacramento Kings and where they'll end up in the playoff standings, to bet the Sacramento Kings over or under on their win totals, to bet the Sacramento Kings to win the championship if you really want to go crazy and potentially hit on a massive payday if that Cinderella story came true. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And this Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster, and the best part, for free. LinkedIn Jobs isn't just another job board for you to sift through, right? LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's like having a scouting department for your team right there for you that sifts through those candidates, finds the best ones for you so you can talk to the people that you want to be talking to and ultimately make those faster hires. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time and the resources to go through a long hiring process. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make that process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, DeMarcus Cousins did not get too many opportunities to compete in playoff races in Sacramento. There was one at the very, very end of his time with the Kings where he was traded in the middle of it, and the Kings essentially bowed out of that playoff race. DeMarcus Cousins, many in Sacramento believe him to be one of the greatest Sacramento Kings of all time. Why am I bringing him up? Well, because very recently in an interview, Boogie said that his time in the NBA is done. Now, to be clear, he didn't say that he was retiring from professional basketball. He's been playing overseas for a while now. He's been a journeyman trying to make his way back into the NBA. Of course, the Kings traded him before getting him that massive payday. He went to New Orleans, had an amazing first season in New Orleans, looked to be still on his way to a major payday with the Pelicans. Unfortunately, got hurt there. Has never been the same. Unfortunately, missed out on that major payday. Never really got it, and has been in and out of the NBA since that point. Look, DeMarcus Cousins is an interesting figure, right? Controversial, I don't feel like is the right word. He has had plenty of highs and plenty of lows here in Sacramento. If you bring him up, that name rings a bell and quite often sparks a reaction amongst Sacramento Kings fans. So many love and adore the man. Many disliked him, disliked his attitude, thought that they could never win with him. I will say this. In the short time that I have covered the Kings and covered the NBA professionally, there has not been a more dominant player that I have seen and that I have covered in that time. Now, there's a very big difference in between dominance and skill, right? Because Domantas Sabonis, in my opinion, is a way better center than DeMarcus Cousins. He is. DeMarcus Cousins was a better scorer, absolutely. And DeMarcus Cousins was dominant in terms of he got into the paint and he had that attitude, he had that fire, he had that energy. There was little you could do to stop that man when he got into that groove. He was just that good. There was a period of time, a couple of seasons in a row, where DeMarcus Cousins was hands down the best big man in the league. It wasn't close. He just happened to be on a really, really bad team. Domantas Sabonis is a far more skilled big man, right? Domantas Sabonis, better rebounder, significantly better passer, higher IQ basketball player, in my opinion, much more of a winning basketball player than DeMarcus Cousins ever was. But when I say dominant, I mean Boogie did things on a nightly basis that we truly took for granted. Unfortunately, he didn't do it on a winning team. A lot of that had to do with him, right? Things with him, he had issues. Things did not work out in Sacramento. He was a large part of that. He also had his shortcomings on the floor. How did you stop DeMarcus Cousins? You got him into foul trouble, or you got him so pissed off that he kicked his own self out of the game by getting technical fouls, getting tossed out. There were teams that gave the job of getting under DeMarcus Cousins' skin to some journeyman player, like Mike Dunleavy Jr. did that at one period of time. Marcus Smart used to do that with the Boston Celtics, right? There were different players. Their job was just to piss Boogie off so that he would get unfocused, get tossed out of the game, and the Kings' chances of winning went from slim to none, right? Boogie had his shortcomings, for sure. But on a nightly basis, we watched this man dominate in the NBA. His 4 highest scoring games of his career all came as a member of the Sacramento Kings. 56 points, 12 rebounds, 2 blocks versus the Charlotte Hornets. 55 points, 14 rebounds, 3 blocks against the Portland Trail Blazers. If I'm not mistaken, that is the It's Getting Ridiculous game where Boogie was thrown out and then had that ejection rescinded, so he came back out inside the Golden One Center to a ruckus applause and ended up helping the Kings, I think, win that game, and then had that legendary post-game interview with Katie Christensen on the floor. 48 points, 13 rebounds versus the Indiana Pacers. 46 points, 15 rebounds versus, I believe this was Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. So those are just examples of the ridiculous numbers that DeMarcus put up here in Sacramento. Again, dominant player. Off the floor, we know that Boogie had his issues, right? He clashed with members of the Sacramento media. He had he had a temper. He also was one of the most impactful members of this community that I think the Sacramento Kings have ever had. Like, DeMarcus Cousins did things all the time, from his Santa Claus that he would do every single year, dressing up as Santa and meeting kids in need and helping them have a good Christmas and getting toys and stuff like that. He did that every single year. There was also a tragic passing of a Grant High School football player who was killed in a shooting, and I believe DeMarcus paid for the funeral of that player for his family to be able to help in whatever small way he could in that absolute tragic event. Like, DeMarcus was so plugged in and truly loved his time in Sacramento. He did. He loved this city. He had his issues. He had his issues with certain people in the organization, certain people outside of the organization. I don't think the Kings ever really would have won with him. Their best chance to win with DeMarcus Cousins, they screwed up when they fired Mike Malone. I think that would have been the only way to work. When the Kings did that, made that decision, I think they ended their era of ever having any success with DeMarcus Cousins here in Sacramento. At that point, it was the right decision to trade him away, to let him go. But I look back at that DeMarcus Cousins period. I'm very, very happy to be in the position where the Sacramento Kings are now, right? For the Kings to be in the playoffs, playing meaningful basketball. But I will always have fond memories of watching number 15 dominate for the Kings on a semi-nightly basis. So his NBA career sounds like it's over, might be over, might never play an NBA game again. I don't know if he's ever going to play a basketball game again. If he does, overseas, whatever. No ill will for the guy. No real interest in following his career from here on out. And whether you like this or not, some people have been talking about it. I don't think the idea of the Kings retiring DeMarcus Cousins' jersey, I think it's absurd. I think it's silly. Again, he never won more than, I think, 38 games in a season as a member of the Kings. Not all his fault, but he certainly does not in my opinion, deserve to hang up there next to the Webbers and the Mitch Richmonds and the Peja Stojakovic's and Vlade Divac's of Kings history. So I'm okay with Boogie not being a part of Kings history beyond the numbers that he's put up. Maybe it would be cool to see him in the Golden One Center for a game again, for the fans to give him a cheer and round of applause that I think he would deserve. But I will remember the DeMarcus Cousins era fondly, because when I started my career actually covering the Kings, when I transitioned from fan into media member, DeMarcus was a part of those teams. And I'll always appreciate him for that. This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Well, before we wrap up, I've mentioned a number of times on this show the next Kings game tomorrow night, Sunday night game against the Los Angeles Clippers, a team that the Kings have had a lot of trouble against this season. But you may not be aware, and hopefully you are, that this Saturday is the 1-year anniversary of one of the greatest NBA regular season games of all time. 1 year ago today, the Sacramento Kings and Los Angeles Clippers went into double overtime in the second highest scoring game in NBA history, where the Kings defeated the Clippers 176-175. Yes, that was a year ago today. And I remember running through this studio here, screaming at the top of my lungs, saying, put some respect on the Kings. This is a playoff team. That was the night to me that the Kings absolutely cemented themselves as they belong here, right? Think of the context. The Kings come out of the All-Star break. They didn't make any moves. We're hoping to ride the high and ride the beam into the postseason, but the Kings are in the third seed, and people don't think the Kings are going to be able to hold on to that spot, and they get a big win like that against a very tough Clippers team who has all the experience advantage and all of the talent advantage, and the Kings find a way to win that game. That night to me was, yep, this Kings team is for real. They're holding on to this playoff spot. They're guaranteed to be a playoff team. That was that night for me. It was also the night that De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk combined for 87 freaking points. And honestly, like, if you remember that game, I encourage you to go back to and watch it. Honestly, it should be a national holiday for Kings fans. Every single February 24th, I believe that's what today is. Yeah, every February 24th, we should go back and watch that game together. It's just that unbelievable a game. The Kings were dead to rights. They were down like 11 points with 3 minutes to go. Come back, Malik Monk hits the buzzer beater to send the game to overtime, or really there was 1 second left in regulation to send that game to overtime. The Kings were down by like 6 or 8 points in the first overtime, came back. Then Nicholas Batum missed a three on a night where the Clippers shot 57% from three-point range and knocked down 26 three-pointers. He misses that big shot. We go into double overtime. The Kings are down by 4 again. Malik Monk hits another clutch three, cuts it to 1. Kings get a stop. De'Aaron Fox, pull-up elbow jumper. He's winning clutch player of the year already, but that helped his resume. He hits that shot. The Kings hold on, win that game. Just an absurd, absurd basketball game. And it's fitting that it comes 366 days from the Kings and Clippers again. Except this time, Kings are trying to catch the Clippers. This time, the Kings aren't sitting in the third seed holding everybody off. The Kings are trying to climb their way into an actual playoff spot. I don't know if my heart can handle another 176-175 game, but if the Kings can find a way to beat the Clippers tomorrow, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of how they do it, in this case, for sure, it could be the ugliest basketball game we've ever seen, where the Kings turn the ball over 40 times. You're not going to get a pissed off Matt George if the Kings beat the Clippers tomorrow in Los Angeles. Hopefully they can do it again on this road to the playoffs. Appreciate your support here of the Locked On Kings podcast. Of course, we'll have a podcast episode after, hopefully, that Kings win. But regardless of the result, I will have a podcast for you on Sunday evening. So keep an eye out for that as well. And then Monday, we're back inside the Golden One Center, Kings and Heat. If you're going to that game, let me know. I'm always at the top of section 105 in the media seating area. If you're going to the game, let me know. Would love to be able to chat with you before the game or during halftime or something and say hi and talk a little Kings with you in person. So I really would appreciate that. But thank you for your support. Let's enjoy this road back to the playoffs. I do think the Kings are going to make the postseason. That we'll get back into a playoff series and we get all back into that chaos and stress together. But let's enjoy this ride while we can, because again, 2 years ago, this is the stress that we were wishing for, right? Well, it's here. All right, now let's enjoy it and let's deal with it. I appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.